Hello, and welcome to UHCL's Counseling Centers online Dialectical Behavioral Therapy skills group titled All the Skills. Dialectical Behavioral Therapy, or DBT, is an empirically supported therapy. DBT is influenced by the philosophical perspective of dialectics, which means two things can seem opposite but can both be true and coexist at the same time. In DBT, the core is to build acceptance and change together. So there are sets of acceptance skills as well as change skills. Skills are further divided into 4 skill modules. These modules are mindfulness, emotional regulation, interpersonal effectiveness, and distress tolerance. It's our hope that in teaching you DBT skills, you'll be able to live in the moment, develop healthy ways to cope with stress, manage your emotions, and improve your relationship with others. Today's module is on distress tolerance, or ways to cope with stress. As we review our module today, please feel free to pause, rewind, or fast forward the video as necessary, or to review it as many times as desired. We'll begin with the outline for our module for today. After reviewing this video, you'll know what distress is from a DBT standpoint, when to use your distress tolerance skills. We'll talk about your physiological skills, and lastly, we'll end with accepting reality and how this can benefit from minimalizing suffering and distress. Let's begin with the definition of crisis and what distress means in the context of distress tolerance. Examples of distress include pain, suffering, ache, discomfort, anxiety, woe, misery, trouble, unhappiness, despair, sorrow, worry, or angst. So you see, if we're using the definitions that we've just come up with to explain what distress tolerance is, you might notice that distress tolerance is all about being able to put up with and accept painful or uncomfortable situations. This is important to note. The skills today, the skills of distress tolerance, are not about trying to solve the problem. It is also not about liking or agreeing with the pain or situation that you are in. The skills in this module are designed to simply get you through painful situations without making the situation worse. It is impossible for a person to go through their life without ever experiencing pain. And we should be in agreement that at some point in our lives, we'll have to cope with distress and pain. In some instances, this is physical pain, like breaking a bone or stubbing a toe. In other instances, this may be emotional pain, like sadness or anger. We can't always predict when we're going to stub our toe or when we're going to feel angry. And because of this unpredictability, we usually fall back to the coping strategies we've used in the past to deal with pain, and of course, hope that they work. Often, if the pain we're experiencing is particularly intense, occurs frequently, or comes on quickly, we can become overwhelmed by the distress and attempt to deal with the pain or suffering in ineffective or unhealthy ways. This is an attempt to try and make the pain go away as quickly as possible. The problem with this occurs is that many of the strategies we use when we're feeling overwhelmed can actually worsen our problems in the long term and take us further away from where we actually want to be. Some examples of these unhelpful strategies include isolating ourselves from others to avoid a situation, ruminating on past problems, pains, or mistakes, becoming aggressive towards others, self-harming behaviors, engaging in discussion or risky behaviors, avoiding pleasant activities as a form of self-punishment, or even resigning oneself to living with ongoing pain. Do we think that we make good decisions when we're in a high emotional mind and highly distressed? Likely not. And this is why distress tolerance strategies can be so helpful. They allow us to sit together and accept an uncomfortable or stressful situation without creating a bigger problem until we're in the right state of mind to be able to effectively deal with the cause of our distress. So, to summarize, the goals of this module, the goals of distress tolerance, are survive our crisis situations or the things that cause us suffering, and accepting reality, not liking it, but accepting it to be able to get to a place where we can later fix the problem, if possible. Let's review our first distress tolerance skill, the STOP skill. STOP stands for stop, take a break, observe, and then proceed mindfully. Let's break this down piece by piece. First, we pause, freezing. Our emotions may tell us to do something differently. But we want to pause for a second. Think back to any emotional regulation module myths. Any ideas of, I have to do this or I should do this. If you are unaware of what emotional regulation module myths are, we encourage you to see the module titled Emotional Regulation. Take a step back. Take a break. Let go and take a deep breath. This can be in a specific count or just one deep breath. Following your deep breath, observe, both internally and externally. What are you feeling on the inside in this moment? On the outside? What do you notice in your surroundings or in your situation? Once you have these details, when you've taken a step back, you've paused, and you're observing your surroundings, let's proceed mindfully. We want to act with awareness and intentionality. Consider your thoughts and feelings, the situation, and other people's thoughts and feelings in the situation. Consider your wise mind. Will your actions be effective? If I proceed with this plan, will it make the situation better or worse? Alternatively, after we've used our stop skill, if we're unsure and time permits, of course keeping in mind that time must permit, we can use some basic problem-solving distress tolerance skills. For example, we can observe and name our urges to act in these moments of crisis or suffering. What are the pros to this? What would be the cons to doing this? We can create the opposite act. For example, if I want to do this, and I did it, what would be the pros? What would be the cons? If I do not do this, what would be the benefit of not doing it, or the con of not doing it? If time permits, this can be excellent in pairing up with the stop skill. We also have several physiological skills that we can utilize. A helpful acronym for this are our TIP skills. We want to reduce our extreme emotions, and we can do this through physiological changes because the mind and body are so connected. We can begin by tipping the temperature. For example, making a room colder or warmer can take our mind away from our suffering and allow us the chance to pause and reflect, to really utilize that stop skill. Intense exercise can also change our mood and reduce extreme emotion fluctuation. Paced breathing, similar to the deep breaths used in the stop skill. You can follow along with your breathing or adopt a natural rhythm, whatever works best for you. You can also take a moment to pair this with a muscle relaxation. This can be guided or self-led, allowing ourselves to enjoy the moment, relax, and then proceed accordingly as necessary. Let's return to our third set of skills, our accepting reality skills. This is called radical acceptance from a DBT standpoint. So for radical acceptance, we need to understand that freedom for suffering requires acceptance from within of what is, letting yourself go completely with what it is instead of fighting reality. Pain creates suffering only when we refuse or are unable to accept the pain. Deciding to tolerate the moment to use these distress tolerance skills is an act of acceptance. And that acceptance is ultimately just acknowledging what is. To accept something is not the same as to judge it as good, or to invite it, or to determine that we enjoy it. We're simply noticing that it is the way that it is. So, radical acceptance. This is the only way when you cannot keep painful events and emotions from coming your way. Keep in mind these questions, or these statements. Reality is as it is. So are you able to change it, or do you need to find temporary acceptance? If this is something that we can change, let's return to problem solving and influence as we can. If this is not something you can change, then this might be a moment to lean into acceptance. There are limitations on the future for everyone, but only realistic limitations need to be accepted. And lastly, as we're considering radical acceptance, we need to keep in mind that life is still worth living, even with painful moments in it. Right? Acceptance of reality as it is requires an active choice. This is like coming to a fork in the road. You have to turn your mind towards acceptance road and away from a rejecting reality road. In doing so, you have to make an inner commitment to accept this. This commitment to accept is not equal to liking. It just turns you to the path. It is the first step. You may have to turn your mind and commit to acceptance over and over and over again. Sometimes you may have to make this commitment many times in the span of a few minutes. As you're listening, perhaps your mind has wondered, why radical acceptance? There are many reasons. First, because changing reality first requires accepting reality. We can't work to change something if we don't acknowledge the way that it is. Second, pain can't be avoided. There is no life that is not filled with some degree of pain or suffering. It is nature's way of signaling something is wrong. In turn, rejecting reality can lead to more suffering through the transformation of pain into suffering. Refusing to accept reality, or the way that things are, can keep you stuck in unhappiness, bitterness, anger, sadness, shame, or other painful emotions. And while acceptance can lead to sadness, usually a feeling of calmness follows. The next skill we'll discuss is turning the mind. It is a radical acceptance skill. To utilize it, we follow this diagram. We observe that we're not accepting something in the moment, the way that something is. We reflect internally, and then make that inner commitment to accept reality exactly as it is. And then we continue to do this over and over again, always choosing to turn our mind to acceptance. If we notice that we are not, we develop a plan for catching ourselves when we drift out of acceptance. This can be an excellent time to utilize the skills for Module 1, Mindfulness. Ultimately, radical acceptance leads to readiness to enter and participate fully in life and living. We call this willingness. Willingness means cultivating a willing response to each situation. In other words, willingness is doing just what is needed in each situation in an unpretentious way. We really want to focus on effectiveness. We want to listen very closely and act from our inner self. In essence, willingness is allowing our awareness, our connection. There is a difference between willingness and willfulness, and hopefully in these skills, we can replace willfulness with an open, accepting willingness. Willfulness is refusing to tolerate the moment, refusing to make any changes that are needed, giving up, doing the opposite of what works or what might be effective, trying to fix every situation, even if some situations cannot be fixed, insisting that one must be in control, and an ultimate attachment to me and what I want right now, as opposed to how the situation might actually be and what would be effective for you. In this module for distress tolerance, we've talked about the stop skill, the tip skill. We've looked at physiological responses, discussed how ultimately refusing to accept reality as it is leads to more suffering, and talked about why we should replace willfulness with a willingness grounded in radical acceptance. Thank you for joining us for this short module.